Chapter 3. The Night Shadows. A wonderful fact to reflect upon, that every human creature is constituted to be that profound secret and mystery to every other. A solemn consideration, when I enter a great city by night, that every one of those darkly clustered houses encloses its own secret. That every room in every one of them encloses its own secret. That every beating heart in the hundreds of thousands of breasts there is, in some of its imaginings, a secret to the heart nearest it. Something of the awfulness of even of death itself is referable to this. No more can I turn the leaves of this dear book that I loved, and vainly hope in time to read it all. No more can I glance into the depths of this unfathomable water, wherein, as momentary lights glanced into it, I've had glimpses of buried treasure and other things submerged. It was appointed that the book should shut with a spring, for ever and ever, when I had read but a page. It was appointed that the water should be locked in an eternal frost, when the light was playing on its surface, and I stood in ignorance on the shore. My friend is dead. My neighbor is dead. My love, the darling of my soul, is dead. It is the inexorable consolidation and perpetuation of the secret that was always in that individuality, and which I shall carry in mind to my life's end. In any of the burial places of this city through which I pass, is there a sleeper more inscrutable than its busy inhabitants are, in their innermost personality to me, or than I am to them? As to this, his natural and not to be alienated inheritance, the messenger on horseback had exactly the same possessions as the king, the first minister of state, or the richest merchant in London. So, with the 3 passengers shut up in the narrow compass of one lumbering old mail coach, they were mysteries to one another, as complete as if each had been in his own coach and 6, or his own coach and 60, with the breadth of a country between him and the next. The messenger rode back at an easy trot, stopping pretty often at alehouses by the way to drink, but evincing a tendency to keep his own counsel and to keep his hat cocked over his eyes. He had eyes that assorted very well with that decoration, being of a surface black, with no depth in the color or form, and much too near together, as if they were afraid of being found out in something singly if they kept too far apart. They had a sinister expression, under an old cocked hat like a 3-cornered spittoon, and over a great muffler for the chin and throat, which descended nearly to the wearer's knees. When he stopped for drink, he moved this muffler with his left hand, only while he poured his liquor in with his right, and as soon as that was done, he muffled again. "No, Jerry, no," said the messenger, harping on one theme as he rode. "It wouldn't do for you, Jerry. Jerry, you're honest tradesman. It wouldn't suit your line of business. Recalled. Bust me if I don't think he'd been a-drinking." His message perplexed his mind to that degree that he was fain, several times, to take off his hat to scratch his head. Except on the crown, which was raggedly bald, he had stiff black hair standing jaggedly all over it, and growing downhill almost to his broad, blunt nose. It was so like Smith's work, so much more than the top of a strongly spiked wall than a head of hair, that the best of players at leapfrog might have declined him as the most dangerous man in the world to go over. Good one, Charles. When he trotted back with the message, he was delivered to the night watchman in his box at the door of Tellison's Bank by Temple Bar, who was to deliver it to greater authorities within. The shadows of the night took such shapes to him as arose out of the message, and took such shapes to the mare as arose out of her private topics of uneasiness. They seemed to be numerous, for she shied at every shadow on the road. What time the mail coach lumbered, jolted, rattled, and bumped upon its tedious way, with its 3 fellow inscrutables inside, to whom, likewise, the shadows of the night revealed themselves in the forms of their dozing eyes and wandering thoughts suggested. Tellison's bank had a run upon it in the mail, as the bank passenger, with an arm drawn through the leather strap, which did what lay in it to keep him from pounding against the next passenger and driving him into his corner whenever the coach got a special jolt, nodded in his place with half-shut eyes, the little coach windows and the coach lamp dimly gleaming through them, and the bulky bundle of opposite passenger became the bank and did a great stroke of business. The rattle of the harness was the chink of money, and more drafts were honored in 5 minutes than even Tellson's, with all its foreign and home connection, ever paid in thrice the time. Then the strong rooms underground at Tellson's, with such of their valuable stores and secrets as were known to the passenger, and it was not a little that he knew about them, opened before them, and he went in among them with the great keys and the feebly burning candle, and found them safe and strong and sound and still, just as he had seen them last. But though the bank was almost always with him, and though the coach, in a confused way, like the presence of pain under an opiate, was always with him, excuse me, there was another current of impression that never ceased to run all through the night. He was on his way to dig someone out of a grave. Now, which of the multitude of faces that showed themselves before him were the true face of the buried person? The shadows of the night did not indicate, but they were all the faces of a man of 45 by years, and they differed principally in the passions they expressed, and in the ghastliness of their worn and wasted state. Pride, contempt, defiance, stubbornness, submission, lamentation, these succeeded one another. So did varieties of sunken cheek, cadaverous color, emaciated hands and figures. But the face was in the main one face, and every head was prematurely white. 100 times the dozing passenger inquired of this spectre. Buried how long? The answer was always the same. Almost 18 years. You had abandoned all hope of being dug out? Long ago. You know that you are recalled to life? They tell me so. I hope you care to live? I can't say. Shall I show her to you? Will you come and see her? The answers to this question were various and contradictory. Sometimes the broken reply was, why, it would kill me if I saw her too soon. Sometimes it was given in a tender rain of tears, and then it was, take me to her. Sometimes it was staring and bewildered, and then it was, I don't know her, I don't understand. After such imaginary discourse, the passenger in his fancy would dig, and dig, now with a spade, now with a great key, now with his hands, to dig this wretched creature out. Got out at last, with earth hanging round his face and hair, he would suddenly fan away to dust. The passenger would then start to himself and lower the window to get the reality of mist and rain on his cheek. Yet even when his eyes were opened on the mist and rain, on the moving patch of light from the lamps, and the hedge at the roadside retreating by jerks, the night shadows outside the coach would fall into the train of the night shadows within. The real banking house by Temple Bar, the real business of the past day, the real strong rooms, the real express sent after them, and the real message returned would all be there. Out of the midst of them the ghostly face would rise, and he would accost it again. Buried how long? Almost 18 years. I hope you care to live. I can't say. Dig, 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 until an impatient movement from one of the two passengers would admonish him to pull up the window, draw his arm securely through the leathern strap, and speculate upon the two slumbering forms until its mind lost hold of them again, and they again slid away into the bank and the grave. Buried how long? Almost 18 years. You had abandoned all hope of being dug out? Long ago. The words were still in his hearing as just spoken, distinctly in his hearing as ever spoken words had been in his life, while the weary passenger started to consciousness of daylight and found that the shadows of the night were gone. He lowered the window and looked out at the rising sun. There was a ridge of plowed land, with a plow upon it where it had been left last night when the horses were unyoked. Beyond, a quiet coppice wood, in which many leaves of burning red and golden yellow still remained upon the trees. Though the earth was cold and wet, the sky was clear, and the sun rose bright, placid, and beautiful. 18 years, said the passenger, looking at the sun. Gracious creator of day, to be buried alive for 18 years. And that's the end of chapter 3. I really thought that one was longer than it was. That one barely took me 10 minutes to get through. My voice is starting to get a little weak, you might have noticed, but I think we'll press on to chapter 4 and keep it in the same video as well, so no need to mess with the recording. Allow me a second to clear my throat. All right, then. Chapter 4, The Preparation. When the mail got successfully to Dover in the course of the forenoon, the head drawer at the Royal George Hotel opened the coach door as his custom was. He did it with some flourish of ceremony, for a mail journey from London in winter was an achievement to congratulate an adventurous traveler upon. By that time, there was only one adventurous traveler left to be congratulated, for the other two had been set down at their respective roadside destinations. The mildewy inside of the coach, with its damp and dirty straw, its disagreeable smell, and its obscurity, was rather like a larger dog kennel. Mr. Lorry, the passenger, shaking himself out of it, were in chains of straw, a tangle of shaggy wrapper, flapping hat, and muddy legs, was rather like a larger sort of dog. There will be a packet to Calais tomorrow, drawer. Yes, sir. If the weather holds and the wind sets tolerable fair, the tide will serve pretty nicely at about 2 in the afternoon, sir. Bed, sir. I shall not go to bed tonight, till night, but I want a bedroom and a barber. And then breakfast, sir. Yes, sir. That way, sir, if you please. Show Concord. Gentlemen's valise and hot water to Concord. Pull off gentlemen's boots in Concord. You'll find a fine sea coal fire, sir. Fetch barber to Concord. Stir about there now. For Concord. The Concord bedchamber being always assigned to a passenger by the mail, and passengers by the mail being always heavily wrapped up from head to foot, the room had the odd interest of the establishment of the Royal George, that although but one kind of man was seen to go into it, all kinds and varieties of men came out of it. Consequently, another drawer, and 2 porters, and several maids, and the landlady were all loitering by accident at various points of the road between the Concord and the coffee room, when a gentleman of 60, formally dressed in a brown suit of clothes, pretty well worn but very well kept, with large square cuffs and large flaps to the pockets, passed along on his way to his breakfast. The coffee room had no other occupant that forenoon than the gentleman in brown. His breakfast table was drawn before the fire, and as he sat, with its light shining on him, waiting for the meal, he sat so still that he might have been waiting for his portrait. Very orderly and methodical he looked, with a hand on each knee, and a loud watch ticking a sonorous sermon under his flapped waistcoat, as though it pitted its gravity and longevity against the levity and evanescence of the brisk fire. He had a good leg, and he was a little vain of it, for his brown stockings fitted sleek and close and were of a fine texture. His shoes and buckles, too, though plain, were trim. He wore an odd little sleek, crisp, flaxen wig, setting very close to his head, which wig, it is to be presumed, was made of hair, but which looked far more as though it was spun from filaments of silk or glass. His linen, though not of a fineness in accordance with his stockings, was as white as the top of the waves that broke upon the neighboring beach, or the specks of sails that glinted in the sunlight far at sea. A face habitually suppressed and quieted was still lighted up under the quaint wig by a pair of moist, bright eyes that it must have cost their owner, in years gone by, some pains to drill to the composed and reserved expression of Tellson's Bank. He had a healthy color in his cheeks, and his face, though lined, bore few traces of anxiety. But perhaps the confidential bachelor clerks in Tellson's Bank were principally occupied with the cares of other people, and perhaps second-hand cares, like second-hand clothes, come easily off and on. Completing his resemblance to a man who was sitting for his portrait, Mr. Lorry dropped off to sleep. The arrival of his breakfast roused him, and he said to the drawer, as he moved his chair to it, "I wish accommodation prepared for a young lady who may come here at any time today. She may ask for Mr. Jarvis Lorry, or she may only ask for a gentleman from Tellson's Bank. Please to let me know." Yes, sir. Tellson's Bank in London, sir?" "Yes." Yes, sir. We have oftentimes the honour to entertain you gentlemen in their travellings backwards and forwards betwixt London and Paris, sir. A vast deal of travelling, sir, in Tellson and Company's house." "Yes. We're quite a French house, as well as an English one." Yes, sir. Not much in the habit of such travelling yourself, I think, sir?" "Not of late years. It is 15 years since I came last from France." "Indeed, sir, that was before my time here, sir. Before our people's time here, sir. The George was in other hands at that time, sir." "I believe so." "But I would hold a pretty wager, sir, that a house like Tellson and Company was flourishing a matter of 50, not to speak of 15 years ago." "You might treble that, and say 150, yet not be far from the truth." "Indeed, sir." Rounding his mouth and both his eyes, as he stepped backward from the table, the waiter shifted his napkin from his right arm to his left, dropped it into a comfortable attitude, and stood surveying the guest while he ate and drank, as from an observatory or watchtower, according to the immemorial usage of waiters in all ages. When Mr. Lorry had finished his breakfast, he went down for a stroll on the beach. Excuse me. The little narrow, crooked town of Dover hid itself away from the beach and ran its head into the chalk cliffs like a marine ostrich. The beach was a desert of heaps of sea and stones tumbling wildly about, and the sea did what it liked, and what it liked was destruction. It thundered at the town, and thundered at the cliffs, and brought the coast down madly. The air among the houses was of so strong a piscatory flavor that one might have supposed sick fish went up to be dipped in it, as sick people went down to be dipped in the sea. A little fishing was done in the port, and a quantity of strolling about by night, and looking seaward, particularly at those times when the tide made and was near flood. Small tradesmen, who did no business whatever, sometimes unaccountably realized large fortunes, and it was remarkable that nobody in the neighborhood could endure a lamplighter. As the day declined into the afternoon, and the air, which had been at intervals clear enough to allow the French coast to be seen, became again charged with mist and vapor, Mr. Lorry's thoughts seemed to cloud too. When it was dark, he sat before the coffee-room fire, awaiting his dinner as he had awaited his breakfast. His mind was busily digging in the live red coals. A bottle of good claret? I'm not sure, actually. Some kind of a wine. After dinner, does a digger in the red coals no harm? Otherwise than as if it had a otherwise than as it had a tendency to throw him out of work. Mr. Lorry had been idle a long time, and had just poured out his last glassful of wine with as complete an appearance of satisfaction as is ever to be found in an elderly gentleman of a fresh complexion who has got to the end of a bottle. With a rattling of wheels came up the narrow street and rumbled into the inn. He sat his glass down, untouched. "This is Mamselle," he said. In a very few minutes the waiter came in to announce that Miss Manette had arrived from London, and would be happy to see the gentleman from Tellson's. "So soon?" Miss Manette had taken some refreshment on the road, and required none then, and was extremely anxious to see the gentleman from Tellson's immediately, if it suited his pleasure and convenience. The gentleman from Tellson's had nothing left for it but to empty his glass with an air of stolid desperation, settle his odd little flaxen wig at the ears, and follow the waiter to Miss Manette's apartment. It was a large, dark room, furnished in a funeral manner with black horsehair, and loaded with heavy, dark tables. These had been oiled and oiled until the 2 tall candles on the table in the middle of the room were gloomily reflected on every leaf, as if they were buried in deep graves of black mahogany, and no light to speak of could be expected from them until they were dug out. The obscurity was so difficult to penetrate that Mr. Lorry, picking his way over the well-worn Turkey carpet, supposed Miss Manette to be, for the moment, in some adjacent room, until, having got past the 2 tall candles, he saw standing to receive him by the table between them and the fire, a young lady of not more than 17, in a riding cloak, and still holding her straw travelling hat by its ribbon in her hand. As his eyes rested on a short, slight, pretty figure, a quantity of golden hair, a pair of blue eyes that met his own with an inquiring look, and a forehead with a singular capacity, remembering how young and smooth it was, of rifting and knitting itself into an expression that was not quite one of perplexity, or wonder, or alarm, or merely of a bright fixed attention, though it included all of the 4 expressions. As his eyes rested on these things, a sudden, vivid likeness passed before him, of a child whom he had held in his arms on the passage across that very channel, one cold time, when the hail drifted heavily and the sea ran high. The likeness passed away, like a breath, along the surface of the gaunt pier glass behind her, on the frame of which a hospital procession of negro cupids, several headless and all cripples, were offering black baskets of dead sea fruit to black divinities of the feminine gender. And he made his formal bow to Miss Manette. "Pray take a seat, sir," in a very clear and pleasant young voice, a little foreign in its accent, but a very little indeed. "I kiss your hand, miss," said Mr. Lorry, with the manners of an earlier date, as he made his formal bow again and took his seat. "I received a letter from the bank, sir, yesterday, informing me that some intelligence or discovery— the word is not material, miss, either word will do— well, respecting the small property of my poor father, who I never saw, so long dead." Mr. Lorry moved in his chair and cast a troubled look towards the hospital procession of negro cupids, as if they had any help for anybody in their absurd baskets. "Rendered it necessary that I should go to Paris, there to communicate with a gentleman of the bank, so good as to be dispatched to Paris for the purpose." "Myself?" "As I was prepared to hear, sir." She curtsied to him. Young ladies made curtsies in those days, with a pretty desire to convey to him that she felt how much older and wiser he was than she. He made her another bow. "I replied to the bank, sir, that as it was considered necessary by those who know, and who are so kind to advise me, that I should go to France, and that as I am an orphan, and have no friend who could go with me, I should deem it highly if I might be permitted to place myself during the journey under that worthy gentleman's protection. The gentleman had left London, but I think a messenger was sent after him to beg the favour of his waiting for me here." "I was happy," said Mr. Lorry, "to be entrusted with the charge. I shall be more happy to execute it." "Sir, I thank you indeed. I thank you very gratefully. It was told me by the bank that the gentleman would explain to me the details of the business, and that I must prepare myself to find them of a surprising nature. I have done my best to prepare myself, and I naturally have a strong and eager interest to know what they are." "Naturally," said Mr. Lorry. "Yes, I—" After a pause, he added, again settling the crisp flaxen wig at his ears, "It is very difficult to begin." He did not begin, but in his indecision met her glance. The young forehead lifted itself into that singular expression, but it was pretty and characteristic, besides being singular, and she raised her hand as if with an involuntary action she caught at or stayed some passing shadow. "Are you quite a stranger to me, sir?" "Am I not?" Mr. Lorry opened his hands and extended them outwards with an argumentative smile. Between the eyebrows and just over the little feminine nose, the line of which was as delicate and fine as it was possible to be, the expression deepened itself as she took her seat thoughtfully in the chair by which she had hitherto remained standing. He was watching her as she mused, and the moment she raised her eyes again went on. "In your adopted country, I presume, I cannot do better than to address you as a young English lady, Miss Manette." "If you please, sir." "Miss Manette, I am a man of business. I have a business charge to acquit myself of. In your reception of it, don't heed me any more than if I was a speaking machine. Truly, I am not much else. I will, with your leave, relate to you, miss, the story of one of our customers." "A story?" He seemed wilfully to mistake the word she had repeated, when he added, in a hurry, "Yes, customers. In the banking business, we usually call our connection our customers. He was a French gentleman, a scientific gentleman, a man of great acquirements, a doctor." "Not of Beauvais?" "Why, yes, of Beauvais. Like Monsieur Manette, your father, the gentleman was of Beauvais. Like Monsieur Manette, your father, the gentleman was of repute in Paris. I had the honor of knowing him there. Our relations were business relations, but confidential. I was at that time in our French house and had been, 20 years. "At that time? I may ask, at what time, sir?" "I speak, miss, of 20 years ago. He married an English lady, and I was one of the trustees. His affairs, like the affairs of many other French gentlemen and French families, were entirely in Tellison's hands. In a similar way, I am, or I have been, trustee of one kind of another of scores of our customers. These are mere business relations, miss. There is no friendship in them, no particular interest, nothing like sentiment. I have passed from one to another in the course of my business life, just as I pass from one of our customers to another in the course of my business day. In short, I have no feelings. I am a mere machine. To go on." "But this is my father's story, sir, and I begin to think," the curiously roughened forehead was very intent upon him, "that when I was left an orphan through my mother's surviving my father only 2 years, it was you who brought me to England. I am almost sure it was you." Mr. Lorry took the hesitating little hand that confidingly advanced to take his, and he put it with some ceremony to his lips. He then conducted the young lady straight away to her chair again, and holding the chair back with his left hand, and using his right by turns to rub his chin, pull his wig at the ears, or point what he said, stood looking down into her face while she sat up, looking up into his. "Miss Manette, it was I, and you will see how truly I spoke of myself just now in saying I had no feelings, and that all the relations I hold with my fellow creatures are mere business relations, when you reflect that I have never seen you since. No, you have been the ward of Tellson's house since, and I have been busy with the other business of Tellson's house since. Feelings? I have no time for them, no chance of them. I pass my whole life, miss, in turning an immense pecuniary mangle. After this odd description of his daily routine of employment, Mr. Lorry flattened his waxen wig upon his head with both hands, which was most unnecessary, for nothing could be flatter than its shining surface was before, and resumed his former attitude. So far, miss, as you have remarked, this is the story of your regretted father. Now comes the difference. If your father had not died when he did, don't be frightened how you start. She did indeed start, and she caught his wrist with both her hands. Pray, said Mr. Lorry in a soothing tone, bringing his left hand from the back of the chair to lay it on the supplicatory fingers that grasped him in so violent a tremble. Pray control your agitation, a matter of business. As I was saying. Her look so discomposed him that he stopped, wandered, and began anew. As I was saying, if Monsieur Manette had not died, if he had suddenly and silently disappeared, if he had been spirited away, if it had not been difficult to guess to what dreadful place, though no art could trace him, if he had an enemy and some compatriot who could exercise a privilege that I in my own time have known the boldest people afraid to speak of in a whisper. Across the water there. For instance, the privilege of filling up blank forms for the consignment of any one to the oblivion of a prison for any length of time. If his wife had implored the king, the queen, the court, the clergy, for any tidings of him, and all quite in vain, then the history of your father would have been the history of this unfortunate gentleman, the Doctor of Beauvais. I entreat you to tell me more, sir. I will. I'm going to. Can you bear it? I can bear anything but the uncertainty you leave me in at this moment. You speak collectedly, and you are collected. That's good. Though his manner was less satisfied than his words. A matter of business. Regard it as a matter of business. Business that must be done. Now, if this doctor's wife, though a lady of great courage and spirit, had suffered so intensely from this cause before her little child was born. The little child was a daughter, sir. A daughter, a matter of business. Don't be distressed. Miss, if the poor lady had suffered so intensely before her little child was born that she came to the determination of sparing the poor child the inheritance of any part of the agony she had known the pains of, by rearing her in the belief that her father was dead. Oh, no, don't kneel. Why in heaven's name should you kneel to me? For the truth, oh dear, good, compassionate sir, for the truth. A matter of business. You confuse me, and how can I transact business if I am confused? Let us be clear-headed. If you could kindly mention now, for instance, what 9 times 9 pence are, or how many shillings and 20 guineas, it would be so encouraging. I should be so much more at ease about your state of mind. Without directly answering to this appeal, she sat so still when he had very gently raised her, that in the hands that had not ceased to clasp his wrist were so much more steady than they had been, that she communicated some reassurance to Mr. Jarvis Lorry. That's right, courage! Business, you have business before you, useful business. Miss Manette, your mother took this course with you. And when she died, I believe broken-hearted, having never slackened her unavailing search for your father, she left you, at 2 years old, to grow to be blooming, beautiful, and happy, without the dark cloud upon you of living in uncertainty, whether your father soon wore his heart out in prison, or wasted there through many lingering years. As he said the words, he looked down with an admiring pity on the flowing golden hair, as if he pictured to himself that it might have already been tinged with gray. You know that your parents had no great possession, and that what they had was secured to your mother and to you. There has been no new discovery of money or of any other property, but... He felt his wrist held closer, and he stopped. The expression in the forehead, which had been so particularly attracted his notice, and which was now immovable, had deepened into one of pain and horror. But he has been found. He is alive. Greatly changed, it is too probable. Almost a wreck, it is possible, though we will hope the best, still alive. Your father has been taken to the house of an old servant in Paris, and we are going there. I, to identify him if I can. You, to restore him to life, love, duty, rest, and comfort. A shiver ran through her frame, and from it through his. She said, in a low, distinct, awe-stricken voice, as if she were saying it in a dream, I'm going to see his ghost? It will be his ghost, not him. Mr. Lorry quietly chafed the hands that held his arm. There. See now. The best and the worst are known to you now. You are well on your way to the poor wronged gentleman, and with a fair sea voyage and a fair land journey, you will soon be at his dear side. She repeated in the same tone, sunk to a whisper, I have been free. I have been happy. Yet his ghost has never haunted me. Only one more thing, said Mr. Lorry, laying stress upon it as a wholesome means of enforcing her attention. He has been found under another name. His own, long forgotten, or long concealed. It would be worse than useless now to inquire which, worse than useless to seek to know whether he has been for years overlooked, or always designedly held prisoner. It would be worse than useless now to make any inquiries, because it would be dangerous. Better not to mention the subject anywhere or in any way, and to remove him, for a while at all events, out of France. Even I, safe as an Englishman, and even Tellson's, important as they are to French credit, avoid all naming of the matter. I carry about me not a scrap of writing openly referring to it. This is a secret service altogether. My credentials, entries, memoranda, and all comprehended in the one line, recalled to life, which may mean anything. But what is the matter? She doesn't even notice a word. Miss Manette! Perfectly still and silent, and not even fallen back in her chair, she sat under his hand, utterly insensible, with her eyes open and fixed upon him, and with that last expression looking as if it was carved or brandished into her forehead. So close was her hold upon his arm that he feared to detach himself, lest he should hurt her. Therefore, he called out loudly for assistance without moving. A wild-looking woman, whom even in his agitation Mr. Lorry observed to be all of a red color, and to have red hair, and to be dressed in some extraordinarily tight-fitting fashion, and to have on her head a most wonderful bonnet like a grenadier wooden measure, and good measure too, or a great Stilton cheese, perhaps, came running into the room in advance of the inn servants, and soon settled the question of his detachment from the poor lady by laying a brawny hand upon his chest and sending him flying back against the nearest wall. I really think this must be a man, was Mr. Lorry's breathless reflection, simultaneously with his coming against the wall. Why, look at you all, bawled this figure, addressing the inn servants. Why don't you go and fetch things instead of standing there staring at me? I am not so much to look at, am I? Why don't you go and fetch things? I'll let you know. If you don't bring smelling salts, cold water, and vinegar quick, I will. There was an immediate dispersal for these restoratives, and she softly laid the patient on a sofa and tended her with great skill and gentleness, calling her my precious and my bird, and spreading her golden hair aside over her shoulders with great pride and care. And you and Brown, she said indignantly, turning to Mr. Lorry, couldn't you tell her what you had to tell her without frightening her to death? Look at her, with her pretty pale face and her cold hands. Do you call that being a banker? Mr. Lorry was so exceedingly disconcerted by a question so hard to answer that he could only look on at a distance, with much feebler sympathy and humility, while the strong woman, having banished the inn servants under the mysterious penalty of letting them know, something not mentioned if they are stayed there, staring, recovered her charge by a regular series of gradations, and coached her to lay her drooping head upon her shoulder. I hope she will do well now, said Mr. Lorry. No thanks to you and Brown if she does, my darling pretty. I hope, said Mr. Lorry, after another pause of feeble sympathy and humility, that you accompany Miss Manette to France. A likely thing, too, replied the strong woman. If it was ever intended that I should go across salt water, do you suppose Providence would have cast my lot in Ireland? This being another question hard to answer, Mr. Jarvis Lorry withdrew to consider it. And that is the end of chapter 4. All right. So, I love the setup so far. Setup is great. It seems we shall send Mr. Lorry and this young girl to France, and I suppose they will get caught in the middle of the French Revolution. I'm not exactly sure how this is supposed to go. I'm not exactly sure. This is why I like reading old books. The structure is so strange to the modern eye. Even though it is the basis for most of the structures we have iterated off of them so much that they are strange to us now, that I can't really tell where this is supposed to be going, which is excellent. I do love that a lot. However, as you can hear by the coughs in my voice, I do have to stop us there for today. So we'll cut the recording there. So far, not much of a philosophical bent to ponder. So we'll leave it at that until something really does happen. This is just a setup, this is the rising action. I'm sure very soon we shall see something actually happen.